What I want to know is what you fight for in your business, your mission, so to speak.
So I have a phrase, I adopted it, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago. And that phrase, I've actually trademarked it. I think it's important. The phrase is innovate with confidence. What I fight for is because we work with innovators. I think you can define innovation in a lot of different ways. Anybody starting a business is probably innovating, right? Or should be innovating. They're not. Because you're the odds
That's
are
where the
against
value part
startups.
is.
Yeah, if you don't innovate, you don't stand out. And if you don't stand out, you can't establish leadership. And you can't establish, you don't have strategy. Being innovative is equivalent in a lot of ways to having strategy in your business, creating that competitive, sustainable advantage. And so my goal has been for the last dozen years to help my clients innovate with confidence.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. From the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer. The ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what? I can fix that. I can help people. I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, and today I have the pleasure of having on the line Jeff Holman. Jeff, are you there?
I am, and it's my pleasure to be with you.
So I'm glad to have you here, Jeff. I know I always like to start these podcasts off because my wife and I, we travel full time, letting our audience know where we're at. So we are in southern Florida for the winter, enjoying ourselves. Where are you calling in from, Jeff?
Salt Lake City area in Utah.
So has it started getting cold there yet? Are you still enjoying the fall weather, or is it snowing?
No, we're starting to get some snow. Foothills are getting snow. There's a ski resort that's open. There's a couple more opening next week. So it's wintertime. I got up and played tennis this morning with my son, and as we're driving, he said Google told him it was 25 degrees this morning. So it's cold.
You guys were playing tennis out. Were you guys playing tennis outdoors in 25 degrees?
No.
I was going to say that's a dedication to the sport right there.
I mean, we don't play if it's less than 40. No, we played indoors.
That's fun. Yeah, my son and I do martial arts, and we train outside mostly because we train on video with our instructor, and we've traveled around the country. And last winter, we definitely had to bundle up because it's 30 degrees outside and snow on the ground, and we're in 2 or 3 layers just to do our martial arts workouts. So yeah.
I will say running outside in the snow has been some of the best, most serene exercise I've ever done. But you got to layer up for it.
Yeah, and I love that part of the country too. I think it's Alta or Snowbird. One of them has the largest rock climbing wall in the U.S., outdoor rock climbing wall. It's 127 feet tall. We climbed that one. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Of course, Alta won't let me go there to ski because I don't ski. I snowboard in there.
Oh,
they're exclusive.
But that's understandable.
Snowbird is.
See, this is where we'll have I'm a skier. Well, actually, technically, I use ski boards, they're 110 centimeters, and it's basically a snowboard on each foot. So it's more akin to rollerblading on the snow.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I've probably seen a few people on the slopes doing something like that and thought, what is that?
Yeah, a lot of fun. But we're not in the part of the country with mountains. The highest point of Florida is a bridge overpass, so, and there's no snow here. So before we get too far into this, I always like to do a quick bio of who you are so our audience knows who you are, and then we'll dive into your story. So I'll do that real quick. Jeff Holman is the founder of Intellectual Strategies, and you are revolutionizing how startups and scaling businesses access legal support through the first fractional legal team model. He enables companies to get expert legal guidance as needed without the cost of a full-time in-house team. With degrees in electrical engineering law and an MBA, Jeff brings technical and legal expertise to his work. Admitted to practice in California, Utah, and before the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, he specializes in intellectual property, business strategy, and technology law, helping ambitious companies navigate growth with tailored, on-demand legal support. So what I want to start off with, Jeff, is what are you known for, right? This question sets up who you are now, what your business is like. So basically, who do you serve? What do you do for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me tell you first of all what somebody called me one time. The word they used. I was explaining what I do, and they said, "Oh, you're I know you. You're ungovernable." So I think in smaller circles, I'm probably known in a way to be ungovernable. I'm kind of outside the mold. That being said, what I do and what people know me for within the industry is I run a small law firm. We help small businesses, basically startups, innovators, scaling companies. I used to do work for large corporations, don't do that anymore. So it's all startups. I'm in the startup chaos day in and day out. And I'm known for bringing kind of the technical side and the business side together for these startups because I've got the electrical engineering background, the business background. And so I bring those together and we do it in a unique model that's called, you mentioned, it's the fractional legal team. So you've heard of, fractional CFOs,
Yeah.
fractional CMOs. We do that. In the legal world, a lot of people will refer to outside general counsel. So some attorney at a firm spends a little bit more time on your business, maybe, and they'll be your outside general counsel as kind of a single attorney. So we've taken that model and expanded it so that we have a small team of attorneys, basically a fully staffed in-house legal team that a small business would need. Throughout time, you need contracts, your fundraising, you start up entities, you might need a patent or trademarks. We have all of that under one roof in one team. And so people will hire us as a team on a fractional basis. And so that's really what we've been doing for the last 5 years. I've been trying to tell every law firm out there, this is how you should practice with small businesses. This is what
Yeah.
they need. This is how you align with them.
Yeah.
And it's catching on.
I gotta say, I read your bio before we got on, and my first thought was, I need that, right? As a small business owner, like I was like, fractional legal team, that's perfect, because like we're already experienced with fractional CMOs, fractional CFOs, and that kind of stuff. And for every time I talk to a lawyer, they're like, yeah, it's a $5,000 retainer, and I'm like, I don't have enough legal work to afford a $5,000 retainer, and per
Let
month or
alone, yeah,
whatever.
most people don't want to hire one attorney, let alone have to hire six different attorneys because they've got different expertise that they need. And $5,000 retainers for every one of those. It adds up, and it makes it. It's a failure, frankly, of
It's
the
it's
of the
how you
traditional
get
model.
it's how you get businesses like LegalZoom popping up, where people are like, I can self-service my legal things and not get any like expert legal advice and whatnot. And which I don't know if this is true, but I feel like that's just as dangerous.
For different reasons, it has its own dangers, for sure. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. So I'm fascinated about the types of law that you're in, right? So you said legal entities and patents and trademarks and several other things. Is there a particular reason why you've chosen those fields? Is it because they all work together well for small businesses, or like what's the reason behind like I guess the few different areas that you guys have lawyers in?
Yeah. Well, so I personally have my engineering degree, which is a natural fit to go into patent law, right? And I did that for 15 years. As I practiced as a patent attorney for my clients, I'm like, hey, these guys are doing cool stuff that I'm not. They're not calling me for it because it's fundraising or it's bringing on a board or whatever it might be. They're doing a lot of other business stuff, but they think of me as their patent attorney. I do one thing. I do one thing really well. And so I had the intention of kind of becoming more general counsel. General counsel is what he's the guy or she's the person that will come in and they'll be your point of contract, kind of like a general contractor building a house. They don't do all the specialties, but they manage and organize and make sure it all happens the way it's supposed to. And so you kind of become a jack of all trades at the general counsel level, but you still need this specialized expertise and efficiencies of really expert attorneys. And so as I got into this, there's kind of a path I went down, going in house, meaning working for a company directly, and just seeing the breadth of services that small businesses need. They need most all of the same services that really large businesses need. They just need them in smaller slices, but they still need them all. And so, you think about any business, your business or some of your friends' businesses, whatever it might be, you go through issues. Oh, how do I start my company? How do I hire people? And kind of the things we all learn when we hire somebody, and then we're like, that wasn't the right fit. We need to transition them out or whatever it is. You bring on investors. You have a new product that you create. You have a brand that you're trying to build. All of those things come up, and there's kind of tangential legal issues with all of them. So it's just, I guess going from practicing law to being in the business exposes you and exposed me to seeing that a small company just needs all of these things. There's specialties that are there, they exist, And they should be available in some form to every small business. So I don't know if that's a very
Yeah.
very I don't know,
So
revolutionary theory. It's just that's just the natural nature of business.
I have a follow-up question, and this because I was at a business mastermind this last week and talking about what we do, right? And so we run a podcast post-production company. We do that at scale, and we have, as a result of that, because we do it at scale, and because of the way we've tied in a lot of like the newer AI technologies and how we're pairing them up with our human team, and sort of like we've got some really innovative stuff that we're doing in order to operate at scale. And one of the individuals at the mastermind was like, you should look at patenting your processes, which I didn't know was a thing. And he gave me a couple of reasons for that. He was like, so one of them is when you go, first off, I didn't know you could patent processes. And the second one was when you patent a process, if you can get it granted, right, if you can get a patent granted for one of your processes, that the patent all by itself adds a value to the bottom line of the company, whether or not it impacts your revenue. And
Mhm.
something I can't remember the number. He said somewhere near $300,000 per patent, just as the value of the company. He's like, but on top of that, it also allows you to then maybe license your processes and actually turn that into revenue as well. And so I'm curious because I was just talking to someone, another business owner who'd been through this process. I'm curious to get, as a patent attorney, your legal sort of thought on that and whether or not that's true and it's something that would be worthwhile for businesses to either know or pursue.
Oh, for sure. No, it's a great question. I tend to think of layers of intellectual property or layers of IP in a business, right? And patents are one of those layers. There can be value to having patents in your business. When you think about going to sell your business or whatever, what is the end goal of your business? It's to monetize it somehow, right? Maybe monetize it, cash flow it today, but sell it in 5 years from now. Who knows, right? When you go to sell is oftentimes when you realize people will put a dollar amount to a patent asset or a trademark. Trademarks are just as valuable, maybe more so in your business valuation. So yeah, you can go out and you can protect these things that you're doing. You can put these assets into your portfolio just like you would real estate or personal property, some tangible asset. You can put these intangible assets or intellectual property into your business the exact same way. And there's probably a whole podcast episode about what is patentable, what does it mean to patent a process, how do you do it, what's the process, the timeline, the cost, all of that. In general, though, you can patent new inventions. New inventions can be things, they can be systems, they can be products, and in some cases, they can be processes. Normally, processes are patentable if you put them in the context of like a software implementation of that process. And I'll leave it at that for now because there's kind of
Yeah, that
a
seems
lot
like
of
it's a deep subject, but the baseline answer to the question is if you're doing innovative things in your business, you should probably talk to a patent attorney and see what see what of that is patentable because it might have a valuable like an upside for your business.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's absolutely true, and it's really the way that a lot of legal stuff works, right? So we see a big difference between first-time founders and second-time founders that kind of manifests itself in this way, right? They know that for second-time founders have been down this road. They know that when they go hire somebody, there's probably legal issues that pop up, and they should catch those before they pop up. They know that if you're inventing something or you're creating a new process or product that you can probably get a utility patent or a design patent on that. And so they're aware of that. Whereas a lot of first time founders, they haven't been down that path and they don't know what they don't know, right? It's like if you've got kids, if you've never had a kid, you don't know what it's like to have kids until you've had a kid. And it's a whole different world that you just couldn't have imagined before you've done it. So kudos to you for being in a mastermind where you're getting exposure to some of those lessons from other people who've been down some of those paths.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those important things in business is to find people who are further along than you are and learn from them. And we're in the process of we've got a second startup we're working on that's in the same realm that I've got all sorts of questions for you on already, which I'm sure we can get into at some point. But I want to talk a little bit about your origin story, right? Every good comic book hero has an origin story, right? The thing that made them into the hero they are today, and we want to hear that story. Were you born a hero, or were you bit by a radioactive spider that made you want to get into starting a fractional legal team? Or did you start in a job and eventually move to become an entrepreneur? Basically, where did you come from?
Man, that's a great question. I'll give you some bits and pieces, and I could probably, as an attorney, I could probably talk the rest of the show and just keep going. But I think there are a couple transition points for me, and I'll just mention a few things, a few highlights briefly. Like I knew I wanted to go into engineering because I figured that was a great foundation for whatever else I was going to do in life. Although I didn't really want to be an engineer long term. I knew I wanted to go into business. I actually applied to business school right out of engineering school, no work experience, and all the schools I applied to said, "Hey, go get some work experience. It's required for these top tier schools." And in the meantime, I went to law school. Somebody said, "Hey, patent attorneys are in demand." I'm like, "I don't know what that is, but that sounds awesome." And I went to law school. And so I really fell into patent law and becoming an attorney by chance almost in a way, which led me to work in Silicon Valley for a few years, start my own legal practice, work for some really big companies like IBM, helping them develop patents and stuff like that. But the turning points for me that took me from kind of that foundation that I had to where I am today, there's a couple of them. And I'll just mention maybe two or three of them briefly here. One, when I decided I wanted to be more of a business attorney than strictly a niche patent attorney, I went in house with a company. And 2 weeks into that, I said to myself, I have been practicing law the wrong way for 15 years. Like I've been doing it like all these attorneys taught me, and they're good people. They're just not very good business people. And so it really opened my eyes 2 weeks into working inside of a company, right? A funded startup developing technology. 2 weeks into that, I'm like, I have been doing it wrong. And that was eye opening to me because I thought I was a good attorney. I did a lot of things well, but I don't know that I, prior to that, was the best type of attorney for my clients, right? So that was eye opening. Another time, that kind of said, well, I need to be aligned with clients better than I have been. While I worked at that company, I had a board meeting one time and I was presenting about our patent portfolio and our IP and all this stuff to the board members. And there was a situation where the management of the company had come to me and they said, "Hey, we need to make some changes here and there." And I went ahead and I'm like, "Okay, cool, we'll make those changes." And I've been at the company maybe a year and a half at this point. And we had a board meeting. Our chairman came in. Our outside corporate counsel from a big law firm was there. And I'm giving this presentation of patents, and the chairman turns around, changes the topic completely, and says, "Hey, I heard that you did XYZ." And I'm like, two things went through my head. I thought to myself, yeah, I did because that's what the that's what the executive in the company asked me to do. So I did it. And two, I'm probably getting fired today. Like that I think that what I did at the request of somebody else in the business is probably not what you wanted, right? And so I thought if he digs into this topic one or two layers deeper, he's going to ask some questions that are perfectly valid questions and I have perfectly valid answers for them. But I probably was not aligned with the board of directors as much as I should have been, if that makes sense. And so I'm like, okay, a year and a half ago, I started aligning myself with the businesses and the clients that I work for, but I wasn't fully aligned because there's this other layer of board of directors that has their own agenda, especially when they're outside investors. We know VC companies become different companies, VC backed companies become totally different companies because they're working for investors now as opposed to necessarily working for their clients. So there's these layers of alignment, and I'm like, oh gosh, I think I'm going to be fired today. That didn't happen, fortunately. But the last kind of biggest impactful thing for me that really made a difference as to where I'm at today was had nothing to do with my job at all. Had nothing to do with my career in the moment. It was in January of 2018, if I remember correctly. There was a day in January. I was out with my family in Hawaii. We were in Maui, and I was taking my two oldest daughters. I have four kids. My two oldest, who were like 18 and 15 at the time, I think. I was taking them scuba diving. We were doing what's called a beach dive with a group, right? And so you put all your scuba gear on, you just walk into the water until it's deep enough, and then you swim around. And we're all dressed up in our gear, had our wetsuits on, had our scuba gear on, and my daughters are like, "Hey, take our picture." So I get there and I go to take their picture with my phone, and I said, and I go to snap the photo of them in their I call it cute outfits, but I don't know if scuba gear is cute ever. Go take the picture, and on the camera before I can take the photo, the phone starts buzzing and I get one of these alerts, right? If you remember in 2018, and you might not, because if you weren't there, it probably wasn't a big deal. If you remember in 2018 in January, there was a missile threat scare
I do
in,
remember that.
in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And that's what came up. It said something like warning, ballistic missile threat incoming. This is not a drill. And I'm like, what in the, like, what does that mean? Like, I think I know what a ballistic missile is, but like, that can't be what that, like, how is that?
Like, how do you respond
That's
to
not what,
that?
what's that?
How do you respond to that?
Like with like utter, I don't know, just I was shocked, right? And I had my phone, I had my daughter's phone in my hand. I'm like, guys, like, hey, and I look around and there's like the other people in the group. They've all got their phones in their hand. It's really close to the highway. This is Olawalu Beach. If you've been there, mile marker 14, awesome place. Go there, take care of it. But it's really close to the highway that drives by. People in their trucks are driving by with their phone stuck in their face. Everybody is looking at their phone. I'm like, okay, so everybody's seeing this, and it's the moment where we're like, okay, do we go dive? Do we go in the water? Is it safer in the water? Is it not safer in the water? If I go in the water, though, I got a wife and 2 kids back at the condo. If it's not real, and I'm gonna be dead when I get back if I tell her, oh yeah, I decided to go diving. That would be safer for me. You're like, do I call my parents? Like, do you say, hey, mom and dad, I don't know what's going on, but I love you. You know what I mean? So it's just this kind of moment of reality that your mortality, you see your mortality, right? And it turned out to be a scare. Somebody pushed the wrong button, they say, right? But for me, it was like, holy cow, I got to do something better with my life than what I'm doing. Was I doing anything wrong? No. Was I doing a lot of normal average stuff? Yeah, I was. And it really kind of kicked me into gear to say, how do I take what I know and what I do and do it better? Have a bigger impact, have something that's more fulfilling for me, for my family, for my clients, whatever it might be. And that's maybe just like for me, it hit me in a personal way, but it was really one of the moments where you say, "Oh, I'm going to reevaluate what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it a little bit better." So that was really probably one of the more pivotal moments for me to say, "I'm going to step out of the norm, and I'm going to create something that I think is the best thing I know how to create in the role that I'm in with, my work, my law firm. I left the company that I was at. I call it restarting my law firm because I had this all new vision. Like there is a better way to bring true value to clients. I stopped working with large corporate groups just because I didn't feel like I could really have a say or an impact with them as much. And I work, in the middle of the chaos of these startups because I feel like I can go in there. I've got this blend of expertise across a couple disciplines, 20 years of experience, and I can make a difference, right? I can actually say, you want to avoid $1 million lawsuit today? Like we can have an easy conversation and avoid $1 million lawsuit. That happens, right? Clients are like, oh, we're doing this. I'm like, no, you're not. Don't do that. So you can make a big difference in with kind of little levers making a huge difference for these companies, and it's really fulfilling. So
Yeah.
that's probably a little different than
I
getting bit by a spider. Maybe my spider moment.
But I love the story because your first couple of realizations were like an evolution, like a small evolution for like understanding where your value is in the company and like where, like the difference between like, hey, I learned law, but I didn't learn business. And you started to learn business a little bit and started to learn how law impacts business and how like those of us who are small business owners, how like the law, we think about it and how you can best communicate with us. And then you have that moment of realization with that ballistic missile threat that you're like, okay, that's the moment where you decided I'm going to become an entrepreneur, where you're like, there's a value I can give to the world that nobody else can give. Right. And so, that's the where you go from evolution to revolution and you change everything about what you're doing to bring your value to the world, which is what business owners do, right? They see a problem and they build a solution for it.
I love that, and I'm just going to write it down because I've never heard it phrased that way. What you said and what I'm taking away from that is an entrepreneur. You became an entrepreneur because you're building value that nobody else can give. That's maybe the best definition of an entrepreneur that I've ever heard. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's what we do on this show, right? Talk to entrepreneurs about how they how they got to that point of deciding they were going to do something and provide a value to the world. And it becomes, at least for me, right? And I'll tell you more about our startup that we're working on later, just because I think it'd be an interesting conversation. But it's the kind of
Yeah.
thing where you realize you're like, no, I have to do this. It's not a like, oh, I could do this, or like I could do that, or I could do the other thing. You realize, no, my particular set of skills and my particular set of experiences and the vision I see for this means that like it's the one thing that I have to do. It's the legacy I have to build. And
Yeah.
if you've talked to small business owners and startups and people like in that space, you see that sort of that same sort of, I don't know what you call it. A lot of people, I guess, a lot of people call it vision, but it's like a dedication to that vision. Where you're like, no, this is the thing I have to do, and that's a very
Yeah. I think that's
entrepreneurial thing.
where they get their, yeah, that's where entrepreneurs get their grit and their persistence is, because I agree. They've seen that vision for themselves and they know that that's their role. That's unique to them. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Awesome. So I want to talk then about your superpowers, right? Every iconic hero has a superpower, whether that's your fancy flying suit made by a genius intellect or the ability to call down thunder from the sky or super strength. In the real world, heroes have what I call a zone of genius, which is either a skill or a set of skills that you were born with or you developed over the course of time that really energize all of your other skills. And that superpower is what sets you apart. It allows you to help your people slay their villains and come out on top in their journeys. And the way I like to frame it for my guests is if you look at everything you've done over the course of your life, there's probably a common thread that ties all of your accomplishments and your skills together. And that common thread is probably where your superpower is. And we want to know what that is.
Yeah. These are these are great questions. Are you going to ask me later what kind of animal I would be if I was going to be an animal?
I'm not.
Just this is a great question though. So you know, I feel like I've got the most mundane answer for it, but hear me out. With the stuff that I've done, my engineering, my law, my business, I've really spent a lot of time kind of gaining perspective in these different ways to look at things. You know, engineers look at something systematically, totally different than what like a salesperson would do, right? Business people look at stuff as opportunity and risk, and lawyers look at stuff as like, how do I navigate the channels to help advocate for a client? Like they're really different in a lot of ways. I had when I first went to law school, somebody said, "Oh, you're going to kill it. You're going to law school. You're an engineer. Engineers do way better at law than everybody else."
Yeah.
Well, I went there and I proved him wrong. I thought engineers, like, there's a right answer. You do a problem, there's a right answer. There's partial credit, like you derive all this stuff and you work through it and you get the answer. Law, there is no answer. In fact, there's not even an answer. There's not even like all the questions there to the problem. They're like, they want you to they want you to take the facts and then make up additional scenarios with those facts and say whether those made up scenarios will be right or wrong. Making up scenarios doesn't exist in the world of engineering, right? And then you've got business where there's a bunch of other stuff going on. Anyway, it's been a blast, honestly, kind of going through these different parts or stages in my own education. And so my superpower coming from that is, I'll say it two ways. One, maybe the bland way to say it is I'm really a translator. Like I'm pretty darn good at taking stuff and saying, "Oh, your business guy is saying this. Let me tell you what that really means legally." Or your engineering, your inventor is talking about these things. Let me tell you what we have to do on the legal or the business side to really, leverage that invention the way that you're talking about it. So I translate day in and day out among the different disciplines and for the different executives on a team, right? You're talking to the CEO, he's got a perspective. The CFO is looking at something else. The CTO, the product guy, they're all looking at these things differently. And I feel like I'm pretty darn good at sitting down with them and saying, okay, I know what you're saying. Let me tell you why I think that's important. And I'm going to put it in some words that might be helpful for the other guy to see why it's so important. And that also works at the level of, management versus employee, middle management or employees, being able to translate why the executive team is so stuck on this concept that people are like, why do I have to spend my time doing that? Well, let's talk about it because there's a reason, and there's a reason why people down here don't understand it. And they, those frustrations aren't always communicated up. So there's kind of across disciplines, throughout the hierarchy of an enterprise, there's all these opportunities to translate is the way I see it. And translation to me really means bringing the right perspectives, maybe sometimes new perspectives to people that they didn't already have. And it's kind of easy to do when you're able to draw on a totally different discipline or a different framework than what these other people are coming from. So one thing I try to do in pretty much every conversation I can is say, how do I bring a new perspective to this person or this audience that I'm talking with? It might be revolutionary and it might simply be just, I hadn't thought of it that way before. But bringing new perspectives is something that I thoroughly enjoy, and that's actually why I just made a note here on my pad when you brought a new perspective to me, saying, "Oh, this is an entrepreneur, somebody who brings value that nobody else can do." Like that, I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome!" Like I love
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah, and I love the translator as a superpower because you see that a lot as the entrepreneur, the one who's running the business, and I'm sure you see this in your own company that you realize that like one of your jobs, even if you're not good at it, but one of your jobs is to be a translator, right? To be able to, in our world, we talk a lot of times to the people who are doing like the code and the person who is like doing the payroll, right? And like or the one who's got the vision versus one who's got to write the actual like thing. A lot of times you have to translate something like, okay, here's all the things that they're saying, and here's what that means in like programmatic language, which is like for you for as an engineer, that's really useful to be able to say like, because engineers don't talk the same way that visionaries do, right?
not at all.
My brother talks about this regularly. He works in a machine shop, and he'll get things from engineers, and so you have the engineers who are working on like the theoretical design, and then the machine shop that has to actually make it. And so it's like a lot of times they'll have to go back to the engineer and be like, "Hey, this like inside corner square can't be 90 degrees because the machine you want us to build it on has a spinning tool, and spinning tools are incapable of making 90-degree corners. So you have to re-engineer this, right?" And it's a translation thing back and forth, and you see that just everywhere in business, that one of the biggest bottlenecks essentially is the translation from one person to the next, or one role to the next, or one hierarchy to the next. And so
Yeah.
to have that as like the superpower makes you sort of like invaluable to the organization.
Yeah, I think there is a value there. And I think to your point that not only does it make communication hard and create communication kind of obstacles, but I think that's where a lot of disputes come from. Like legal disputes
Yeah.
between parties is because they're unwilling to communicate. You get one or two parties who are irrational in their approach to communicating with the other party, and you're going to end up with a lawsuit. It doesn't benefit anybody. People say it benefits attorneys, and some attorneys might enjoy that. Like that's that's not my thing. We do some litigation because our clients get into these issues, maybe sometimes because of themselves and sometimes because of the people that they've tried to interact with. But if you can't communicate or you're unwilling to communicate, then you're unwilling to have that translation happen, then legal disputes are typically a result of that. And I get it. I'm a human too. You take me out of my translator role, it's really easy to be like, hey, client, you should do this and this and this, and this is what this means. And then I go, home, or I go play sports, or I go have my own, struggles in a business. Something happens with a vendor or something, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? Like I forget to communicate with them, and that's where the
Yeah.
problems come up. Right?
One of my favorite sayings, and this is usually in the context of like relational advice, but it fits pretty much everywhere, and particularly with this translator conversation, is that 90% of contention comes from unmet or uncommunicated expectations.
Oh yeah,
And like
for
that's
sure.
like the baseline of it. If we can just we know what the if you so I talk about this regularly in our company, that if someone is not performing their job correctly, we don't start with discipline of the employee, right? We start with, did we clearly and effectively communicate what we want to have done, right? Did we
Yep.
document that communication? Did we ensure that the person both had access to that documentation and understood that documentation, right? And so there's like several steps before like that are our fault on
Yep.
the
Yep.
clearly communicated expectations before we get to the employee has a problem, right? Now, if you've hit all of those things and they're still not meeting the expectations, now we know that it's there's a problem with the employee, but it's right back to that translation idea of like, hey, we need to make sure that they understood what the expectations were, and that we did a good job in clearly communicating them.
Yeah, that reminds me of a friend of mine, one of the attorneys I work with. Because when you have different perspectives, you tend to reflect more, and you're like, okay, well, maybe I see why this went wrong. Maybe there's something I should have done. And like you say, before I'm going to go and would it be easier to just go and be like, this is your fault, you fix it? But you're like, well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe there's something I could have done to make it better. Maybe there's something I could have done so that this client had better expectations from us or from the situation, or And so there's a lot of internalizing. And I was talking to one of our attorneys about that. And he said, I don't remember the exact phrase he said. I posted on LinkedIn at some point because it was kind of fitting. He's like, well, Jeff, I know you have an over exuberance for accountability, for for self accountability. And I'm like, I think that was meant to be a compliment, but I think there's a little bit of criticism in there. Probably criticism due. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, it,
So
it does impact us. I think it impacts how I behave, not just the impact I have on other people. So
absolutely. So let's talk about the other side of the coin. So if one side of the coin is superpower, the other side of that coin is always the fatal flaw, right? Every Superman has his kryptonite, or Wonder Woman can't remove her bracelets of victory without going mad. You probably have a flaw that's held you back in your business, something you struggled with. For me, it was things like perfectionism, right? It meant lack of shipping things, right? I could always make it a little bit better before we put it out to the clients, or lack of self-care, right? That meant that I didn't let my clients walk all over me, let my time walk all over me. And, sometimes I even struggle with like being a visionary, but lacking the discipline to implement. Like there's a lot of problems I've struggled with. But, I think more important than what the flaw is how have you worked to overcome it so that you could continue to grow and get your value out to the world? And hopefully sharing this will help our listeners learn a little bit from your experience.
yeah, do you want me to go get my wife? I think she has a list that
She
I
has
could
a
start
list.
with.
Oh,
No, she's great. I actually work with my wife. She runs the operations of our firm. She's way smarter than me, and she does a fantastic job. So no complaints there. And she would probably be hesitant to share some of the things that she might say for fear that they would actually hurt me and be too true. But no, I think I probably have a lot of areas that I can improve in. I'm sure. I think one area that I do get caught up in sometimes, and it impacts the way that I provide services, sometimes positively and sometimes negatively, is I get tied up emotionally with my clients. Like I want my clients to win, right?
yeah.
And I'm not saying, like, there's a lot of people out there who take a win lose proposition, right? It's like, hey, we're going to win at all costs. We're going to bro hustle this thing to death, and we're going to walk away with all the money. Like that's not me, right? It's like I really want my clients to get out of the situations that they're in what they want out of it. And I get tied up sometimes to the point where I maybe become a little bit overly optimistic about what we can do, or about what they're due, what they deserve in the situation, either from us as a team, in which case I'll be like, hey, just like, we're just going to do this. I know it's going to cost us a little money, a little bit more time and money and effort on our side. We're just going to do it because I think it's the right thing to do, right? Or what they might get out of a situation if they're in a dispute or a relationship with, vendors or affiliates or clients, customers, whatever it might be. And I'm like, I get really protective, trying. My wife has a story that she's shared a few times. When she first started working with me, actually, we were working on a patent application for one of our clients. Small client had a new bike part, and Sam, great guy, right? He was trying to bring something new to the world, which is awesome. People have these dreams, and they produce them, and they patent them, and they bring them to the world. It's so fun to see. We were struggling more than we needed to with the patent examiner saying, hey, you can't get this. There's all this stuff out there, and for these reasons, I'm not going to give you the patent. And it didn't really stand out to me, but she's mentioned it a few times over the years. And so I've kind of picked up on it that, oh, maybe it is something there. And in this case, it wasn't, it actually helped, but it's maybe an illustration of getting emotionally invested. And I was on the phone, and you give all these technical arguments like this invention's different, it's better than the other prior art or the references that are already out there, the other products that exist. And I got to the end of my rope, and I just said, hey, listen. And I'm on the phone with a patent examiner from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I said, hey, listen, I've given you all my answers. I've given you all my arguments. I believe really strongly that I'm right. We might have to appeal this case, but before we do any of that, can I just appeal to your sense of humanity? Like, we have that. Let me tell you about Sam. Let me tell you who he is, what he's been doing. And it was really laying out, it wasn't meant to be this tactic even, but it was just laying out, like, I know Sam. I've been to his shop. I've talked to him dozens of times. I know what this product means to him. And I just said, is there anything you can do, anything you can think of that you and me together, working on behalf of, for the benefit of Sam, what can we do to get past this and to get him something that will end up in a patent, because it would just mean so much to him, and all the effort, all the money he's paid to me and my team to do this. Like, how do we do that? I was like, it was an emotional plea to the patent examiner. I don't do that often, but I get that way with my clients, and I'm like, sometimes it helps, sometimes it hurts, right? And fortunately for Sam, we were able to work through that. Patent examiner granted the patent. Other times, though, our team is like, why are you doing this? We're losing money on this client. I'm like, well, I'm invested. I want this guy to win. I want this client to get what I think they deserve out of this. And back to your point before, if I set up the relationship a little bit wrong, if I set the expectation wrong, so be it. I'm gonna deliver on what I think they're expecting from me. So,
Yeah.
from a business perspective, is that a flaw? Maybe in a way. I don't think we lose really from it. But it does cost us, and sometimes it hurts a little bit.
Sometimes it's painful.
That
Yeah,
we
I get that. We've done that a number of times where I'm like, no, this is like we're just gonna do this, even though we didn't set this expectation right. We're not gonna get paid for it the way we should. It's gonna cost us money, right? So like if your business literally only cared about the bottom line, it'd be a flaw. But also your business cares about the people, right? And the value you're bringing to them and the way that you're working to change the world. And sometimes you eat the costs that,
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I'm not to talk poorly about anybody, but that's what the industry that I'm in is known for, right? It's like we're emotionless, heartless, uh, battle-hardened lawyers who we just want to bill every minute of our day, and and if we get something for the client, great. If we don't, it kind of doesn't matter, because we're just feeding our own monster, right? That perspective is not wrong for a lot of reasons. But again, it's not how I like to practice. It's not what's fulfilling to me. And so,
and so you built
you know,
something new.
try what's
I
that?
said, so you built something new.
So I built something new. I'm like, let's do it differently.
Let's do it
Exactly.
differently. So I want to talk a little bit then about your common enemy, right? Every superhero has an arch nemesis, a thing that they constantly have to fight against in their world. And the world of business takes on a lot of forms, but generally speaking, we like to put it in the context of your clients, right? The people that hire you or your firm. And it's a mindset or a flaw that you are constantly gonna have to fight to overcome so you can actually get your people the results that they came to you for. Right. So in the world of someone hiring a fractional legal team, what's a mindset or a flaw that they come to the table with that you constantly have to fight against as to provide the service that you provide?
I laugh a little bit. So I hope none of my clients think I'm talking about them, but I'm probably talking about all of them slightly, right? Same way I would criticize myself. I think that there is, I work with small businesses. I work probably like you do. I work with innovators creating new things. People have dreams, and they want to bring them to market. They want to see their baby come alive. And it's a fascinating process, and it's a totally emotionally driven process for a lot of people. And so I think the common enemy when I'm trying to work with the clients that I do, I think one of the common enemies that I struggle with that makes my job harder helping them, it's two things. It's probably a little bit of ignorance and a lot of optimism. But honestly, without those two things, they probably wouldn't have jumped, 2 feet into this business anyways, right? They
Yeah.
don't quite know what. You hear everybody saying, well, if I knew then what I know now, I probably wouldn't have tried it, right? And but so you get these people who say, well, I don't think there are any issues with this. I'm just going to dive in. And when I dive in, there are not going to be sharks in the water. There are not going to be rocks, under the surface. I'm going to dive in. It's going to be awesome. And it's never totally awesome. Sometimes it's awesome at times and not at others. But for the same reasons that they jumped into their business, and it just creates a little bit of chaos, that they need legal help. But for those same reasons, they don't know that they need legal help. They're not. You don't know what you don't know, and so there's a lot of education that happens with early stage founders and teams, because there is some ignorance, and there is a lot of optimism, and that can lead to unnecessary legal problems. You know, we go in oftentimes and we help. We come in when the legal problems have started to already pile up. They've said, hey, I've got this issue. I've got a partner. I told them I'd give them stock options, but I don't know how to do that. And it's been a year and a half, and I've never given them to them. And we just keep growing our business, and they just put that in the closet, legal skeleton, and put it away. And they're like, hey, I got this employee or this customer, and they said they were going to sue me, and Like, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy building my business. Put it in the closet. And so they kind of, a lot of our clients, when they first call us, the first time founder clients especially, they call us when they've got a closet full of clients especially. They call, I'm losing sleep. Like, I need somebody to deal with legal skeletons. And they're like, that's a result of, it's what makes it fun, and it's also what makes it possible for us to have the impact that we have when we do come in and help do that cleanup.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of thing for the attorneys, and I know you mentioned like second time founders and whatnot tend to have a different view of it. And I noticed just in my own world, right? We've got our main company, right, the Push Button Podcast, and we're working on this secondary company. And I know just because of the way we're approaching the secondary company that like the first thing that we started off with is like, hey, we've got this nice big vision. Here's our pitch deck. Here's all the things we want to build. And then like everything on the pitch deck has like, here's the perceived challenges we think we're going to run into. Right.
Yeah, you've been through it once, and now you're like, I think we got to create a more detailed plan to deal with what we know is coming, right?
Yeah, so like here's the challenges were is like I know the younger version of me doing the same thing would have just had the opportunities, right? And not the challenges. And I know that's a result of experience, but for what you're saying is it's a fairly common first time founder thing because you don't know what you don't know, right? You just don't know the other side of those things.
Yeah, no, and it'd be the same. It's no different than if I take, like, I'm on this journey with my law firm, right? I'm an entrepreneur as much as anybody else, although a lot of people wouldn't think of that with attorneys. But when I go out and I'm like, well, who's my target market, and what type of marketing channel should I be in? Should I be doing Facebook ads? Should I be doing podcast interviews? Should I be doing, you know, webinars or creating white papers, or pick any number of channels? Should I be on TV, whatever, or billboards? If I were a personal injury attorney, should I be on billboard, right? Like, all these channels, and I've got to do the same thing that you guys did, that any other entrepreneur does. And I say, well, I've got to kind of outline my opportunities, look at what the costs and risks are associated with those, and then I've got to do a bunch of testing to see which one works, right? And I'm going to learn some new things when I start testing, because my background is, of all the things I've done, marketing is not one of those, right? So I'm gonna learn stuff along the way, and be like, oh, that one worked, and that one wasted a bunch of money, right? It's no different. So
It's like one
I
of those
totally
things
understand.
that's crazy to me about almost all small business, the legal, chiropractic, doctors, like a lot of them, they go to school to learn to be the technician, but they don't learn the business side, right? They don't learn the marketing, they don't learn the personnel, they don't learn the HR, they don't learn all the things that go into like, oh, like there's more to being a lawyer than practicing law.
Yeah, exactly. Now imagine this. Now imagine you have an engineering degree. And from an engineering perspective, you're like, well, I want to take a holistic, systematic approach to everything I do. And so you're like, well, if I'm going to do this, well, that's going to have an impact here. And so I need to actually figure out this before I do. Oh, that's going to have two more impact. And now you have this whole decision tree of things that are, like you said before, you're like, well, I want to get it perfect before I launch anything. And that is, of all the perspectives or the personalities inside of me, if you want to call it that, like, I have to suppress my engineering personality the most, because while it brings great perspective, it's sometimes a hindrance at driving a business forward, or it would be a hindrance to getting clients the sufficient information they need in a timely manner, right? A lot of our business clients just move too fast. We can't create a systematic or a system level perspective on everything we do for them. So it's an interesting balance, I'll say.
Yeah. So with the common enemy being that first time, don't know what you don't know, again, flip that coin over. You got the driving force, right? So if the common enemy is what you fight against, your driving force is what you fight for, right? Just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, or Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to index and categorize all the world's information. What I want to know is what you fight for in your business, your mission, so to speak.
So I have a phrase, I adopted it, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago. And that phrase, I've actually trademarked it. I think it's important. The phrase is innovate with confidence. What I fight for is, because we work with innovators, and I think you can define innovation in a lot of different ways. Anybody starting a business is probably innovating, right? They're
Yeah,
or should be innovating. They're not, because the odds are
that's where the
against you
value
to
part
start.
is.
Yeah, 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 yeah. If you don't innovate, you don't stand out, and if you don't stand out, you can't establish leadership, and if you can't establish, like, you don't have strategy. Like, being innovative is equivalent in a lot of ways to having strategy in your business, creating that competitive, sustainable advantage. And so my goal has been for the last dozen years to help my clients innovate with confidence. And that, of course, is just a really high level tagline type statement, but it means a lot. And it means how do I educate my clients? How do I help them see, further into the future than they can see right now? How do I help them have the confidence in making decisions? Because a lot of what we do, especially when you talk about new businesses and launching products and putting $10,000 down to get a patent on something that doesn't even exist yet, like there's a lot of speculative action that happens in small business. And how do you, maybe not have 100% confidence in everything you're doing, but how do you have more confidence? How do you remove the risks? How do you understand how fear is, I've talked about in some areas, there's these 4 fears, right? How do the 4 fears kind of keep you from action? How does taking action is the only solution to actually overcoming fear, right? Because then
Yeah.
what was unknown is now known. It might not be what you wanted it to be, but it's now known. And so there's no reason to have fears. So there's innovating with confidence is ties everything that I do together for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that as a tagline. Actually, I don't particularly like the word tagline or slogan or anything. I like the word key message better, right? Because it's like the key message that your business is bringing to the world. Ours for Push Button Podcasts is we democratize storytelling. So yeah, we talk about democratizing storytelling, right? And that's like there's so much more to it. Like you hear the word democratized storytelling and what does that mean, right? And I could probably spend an entire podcast episode just talking about what that means and like how important it is to what we do and what we do for businesses and what we do for nonprofits and what we do in the political space and like everything. Like it all comes back to that one thing is we democratize storytelling. And you have the same kind of thing of like, hey, we bring innovation with confidence, right? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of depth there and you realize, okay, all businesses are working on innovating, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't be in business, right? And so if you're trying to innovate, right, how do you innovate carries with it a certain amount of risk. And entrepreneurs are already got a little bit of the crazy people who are like, no, I'm going to take the risk. And what you're coming in and saying is like, hey, we can actually show you how to take those risks confidently, right?
Yep.
And know that you're going to either protect yourself, protect your intellectual properties, protect the innovations that you're doing, and then do them in a way that knows that you'll be able to operate profitably without, like losing those kind of like there's a lot of depth there when you really think about what does it mean to innovate with confidence.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's been great. And I like democratizing storytelling. That's awesome because the one thing I'm learning, I mentioned maybe my own ignorance with marketing. Storytelling is where it's at.
Absolutely.
It's a skill. It's a skill that most engineers don't have, right? A lot of attorneys have it, and a lot of business people will have that too. But yeah, storytelling is probably the superpower that every business needs at some level to really, because I
So
can have my own message, but if I don't know how to get my message about innovating with confidence out to the masses, through storytelling, then that message, lives and dies with me, and that's not good for me or the people I think that it will help. So
yeah.
storytelling is that vehicle, I believe.
Yeah, I have some pretty deep like thoughts on that. It might be an interesting conversation for you. Are you familiar with the story of creation in the Bible?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the story of creation is essentially that God created the world and he spoke the universe into existence, right? Let there be the heavens and light and all this kind of stuff. He spoke it all into existence with the exception of human beings, right? We weren't spoken into existence. We were formed by his hands out of the dust, and then he breathed life into us. And my contention is that that breath of life, that spark of divinity, is our ability to tell stories, our ability to speak a future into an existence. And it's which makes storytelling not something that humans do, but something that is quintessentially human, right? It's
Yeah.
that spark of divinity that we have. And so the mission for our company is to basically make people aware of that and then teach them how to do it well. Because if you can do it well and you can do it intentionally, then you can create the future that you want to create for yourself, right? And create the future for your clients and for your staff and for the world that, the value that you're trying to put into the world is all going to come back to your ability to tell your story about what you do. And hence the term
That's
democratizing storytelling.
that's totally fascinating. I haven't heard that application of the creation story before, but it makes a lot of sense. And I think we've all heard somebody say, the thing that makes humans different from all the other animals is our ability to rationalize, right? But I've heard it differently, and I believe I've heard it differently. I could be wrong, and I don't know who to attribute it to now at this point from all the podcasts I've listened to. But I think I've heard somebody say in the past, the real differentiator between us and the rest of the animals is our ability to tell stories. That's what makes us different. Maybe that has something to do with rationality or not. I don't know, but yeah,
It's rationality.
our ability to tell stories.
Rationality is a symptom. Storytelling is the cause, right? And I went to. If you ever been to San Diego Zoo, it's one of the biggest zoos in the world. And I remember one time I was there and we're riding on the tour bus with the lady, and she's talking and doing all this stuff, and they're all generally whoever's on the tour bus doing the guided tour, they're all really good. But this one lady, she really understood what she was doing. When we get to the end of the tour, and she said something that stuck with me for probably 20 years now. And she said, she's at the end of the tour, and she's like, so there, I want to talk about the difference between every creature that we just looked at and you guys, right, and the people here on this bus. And he's like, and the difference is essentially that you tell their stories, right? You tell the animals stories. That's why we can do the conservation. That's why we can help these creatures. That's why we have like all the botanical gardens, everything here, the zoo. We're the only creatures on the planet that do what we do. We tell our stories and we tell the stories of all the other creatures. No, there's no tiger out there telling the stories of other creatures, right? Like it's just not the way the world works. But humans do. We tell their stories, and she's like, that's the baseline of conservation, which is what San Diego Zoo is about, is conservation. And that really stuck with me for a long time, that there's something about storytelling that makes us different than everyone else in everything else in the animal kingdom.
That's fascinating, because what I've received from those tours is a lot of information. You go to a new city, you go to a place, and you get all this information about the city. What she did is she took it to the next level, like you're saying, and she just turned information into empowerment. Yeah. She's like, here's how you get to take all this information. I mean, obviously, she created that new perspective for you. I just learned all about these tigers, but now I kind of understand I have a responsibility. I'm empowered to take the next action with all that information I have. That's fascinating.
Yeah. It was just an admission from her that like the reason conservation works, the reason why we can have an impact on our ecology and our biology and all the stuff that's happening here at the zoo is because we tell these animals stories, and then you go out and you tell them to other people, right? And that's how the conservation efforts grow and whatnot. And anyways, I just thought it was a really, for someone who's obsessed with storytelling and runs a company about it, it was a really interesting way to look at that.
I had somebody tell me that I spent some time in Peru when I was younger, and when I was leaving, somebody said to me, hey, you're going back to the United States. We're staying here. They were Peruvian. We're staying here. You're going back to the United States. You are now our ambassador. You get to tell everybody else that in the United States about Peru and the Peruvians and the experiences you've had. So in a way, I've never made the connection, but that's like,
yeah, that
person did the same thing to me that the tour bus guide did with you, and empowered you and kind of challenged you in a way to take that action. That's interesting.
Yeah, I love it. And anyways, we could talk forever about, democratizing storytelling, because that's my passion in life. But I want to talk a little bit about something that's very practical to your business, right? And that we call that on the show your hero's tool belt, right? And just like every superhero has their tool belt with awesome gadgets like batarangs or web slingers or laser eyes or, big magical hammers they can spin around and fly with. I want to talk about the top 1 or 2 tools you couldn't live without to do what you do. Could be anything from your notepad to your calendar to your marketing tools to something you do for your actual service delivery, something you think is essential to getting your job done on a daily basis as an entrepreneur running a fractional legal team.
You've just ignited the engineer in me, and I've got about a dozen things that I think are all part of my tool belt. I won't go into all of them. Let me tell you that too really quick. And I'm not going to go into much detail here, but the number 1 tool belt in my business that I bring to the table is a framework for strategy. I won't go into detail in it, but a strategy has 5 parts, and you got to have all 5 parts to be a strategy, because every client that I work with, whether they're a small business, big business, individual, like in order to be, an innovator and innovate with confidence, like you need to be thinking about strategy in a particular way. And nobody breaks down strategy that I've found. All the books I've read, nobody breaks it down into a really comprehensive, understandable way. It always means something different depending on who you talk to. So having a very universal framework for strategy is something that I believe I bring.
Do you have like simple 5 words to go over like what the five stages are? I'd love to hear them.
I'll say what they are. And we'll just talk about this one tool belt thing. Strategy is a plan, and that's not surprising. It's a plan to deploy valuable resources for a competitive advantage, for a business leadership position, which I think is the one that most people miss. You have to be deploying these resources for a competitive advantage to obtain a business leadership position in your industry or whatever market, however you define it, within a competitive environment. And I think that you can take that definition of strategy to any business out there and you can apply it. You don't need to be talking about, I heard somebody else talk about this thing, and it's like, oh, there's 5 parts and there's 4 parts, and they're like totally disjointed pieces, and you're like, well, how do they fit together? The engineer in me is like, those don't fit together. Like, I don't know how to make those fit. I could do it, but I can't replicate it because they don't really fit. Whereas these, I think they just fit, they flow. You got to have all 5 there. If you have those 5, you got a strategy. If you're missing one of those, you don't really have a strategy. You've got a plan, or you've got a goal, or you've got a vision or something, but it's not a strategy if you're not thinking about all those things. And I do think the key out of all those that most people miss is you've got to be saying, well, what is the business leadership position that I'm working towards? Most of the time that falls into one of 2 camps. It's either market or brand leadership, like an Apple. I'm creating leadership toward being the number one brand. I have pricing, like I can charge what I want. I have better margins because I'm the leader. And the other camp is a price leader, where price leader really means that you're not that you're charging the most. It means that you're optimizing your pricing and cost structures the best so that you can essentially underprice everybody else and still make a meaningful margin. And you can offer the best price to the market. And so, it's a Walmart type of player. They're price leaders. They can take and they can outprice anybody because their cost structure is so much better managed, or maybe sometimes forcefully so, than anybody else, right?
They innovated every stage of their entire distribution channel to be able to do that.
Every stage. So you're really, if you've got a plan to achieve a goal, SMART goals in some amount of time, that's totally fine. If you want to take that into the realm of strategy, though, you need to say, how does that plan and that SMART goal on that timeline help us become the leader in our space, a particular type of leadership position? Add that in and you have strategy. Without that, I think we're missing it. And I think a lot of people are, floating around. There's a lot of strategy consulting that just doesn't, it's cool, it's fun to talk about, but it doesn't drive to any real objective a lot of times because you don't know what to do with it, right? And so that's a framework that I bring in. We do strategy calls with clients and potential clients around that specifically, and it's pretty different. Other attorneys don't do that.
It's really useful. I almost feel like we should schedule a second podcast interview just to go through that strategy framework for people, because that I've never heard it put like that. And we do a lot of business strategy in a lot of different areas and mastermind groups and whatnot. And I love how simple that framework is. And I can see in our own, the other startup we're working on, I can see the elements of those things. I'm like, okay, so but maybe we should talk about them specifically in those ways, because you're right. That's how you build a strategy.
Well, we'll chat on another podcast or offline, and we'll talk about it. I'm happy to. This is the stuff I love to do, right? This is why I'm here.
Speaking of heroic tools, I want to take a few minutes to tell you about a tool we built that powers the Hero Show and is now this show's primary sponsor. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us, and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. And now, back to the Hero Show.
So I got one more question for you here, and that is about your guiding principles, right? One of the things that makes heroes heroic is that they live by a code. For instance, Batman never kills his enemies; he only ever brings them to Arkham Asylum. Or, if you get deep into the Spider-Man comic universe, you find out that he always pulls his punches because he's afraid that he'll hurt someone if he punches them as hard as he actually could. So as we wrap up the interview, I want to talk about the top 1 or 2 principles that you use regularly in your life. Maybe something you wish you had known when you started out on your own hero's journey.
I'm gonna go the easy route. I'm gonna tell you what our core values are at the law firm, and they're not that exciting. It's not like have fun or whatever. But the way I've designed my firm is probably parallel to the way I live my life in a lot of ways, and so I think it applies. But we have 5 core values, we call them. Other people might think, well, those aren't very cool core values, but it doesn't matter. Strategy is the beginning of ours, right? Strategy is the first one, because if you're not strategic, you're missing that spark in your business. I think trust, and a lot of these will come because you'll be like, oh yeah, attorney, this makes sense. Trust is another one. There's a lot of things you can do to build or break trust in a business, any business.
Integrity, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Advocacy. Our business is all about advocating for our clients. Like we're here to advocate. If we're doing stuff to increase our billings as opposed to help you out, we're failing to advocate. And I want that to be top of mind for my team, right? And anybody we work with. I want to know, our goal is to advocate. Call us out if we're not doing it, right? Leadership. There's a lot of times leadership to me means stepping in and making recommendations with, kind of with confidence in a way, like being able to be the leader in the situation. Say, hey, leadership is not just like a position. It's like, who's going to step up and actually recommend practical action to move this thing forward? And a lot of times you get into big meetings and everybody's talking, well, these are the problems and these are the opportunities. And nobody will say, hey, listen, here's what next step is to do X, Y, Z. And part of what we need to do as attorneys, because we're counselors, and I think we really are in leadership positions, whether people would say the same or not, we need to be able to say, well, given everything you've told me, taking that all in, mixing it together with my expertise, my knowledge, my experience, here's what needs to happen. And people need that. You don't go to the doctor and have the doctor just tell you, oh, well, yeah, I see you've got a runny nose and your temperature's high. And so, if you leave that meeting, and sometimes doctors do this, and the doctor says, well, we'll just watch that. You're like, what do you mean just watch that? I came here, like help me out. What do I need to do? I don't want to go home.
Give me actions to take. Yeah.
Yeah. Show some leadership here, dude. So that's leadership to me. And then the last one is expertise. I mean, we need to be deep experts in what we do. Nobody's going to come to us if we're not the expert in patents or trademarks or contracts or fundraising or whatever it might be. It's essential to our business to be experts. Those are the 5 core values that we have. I think that's a really driving force for what I do. Personally, the one I would add to that is fairness. I'm all about being a fair person, I believe. But it's not one that we've adopted.
I love that you don't have to reference anything. You just have the core values. You know them by heart, right? And that is very telling for anyone who has worked in business for any length of time, that the business owners who know their core values, they run a different kind of organization, and that's it's powerful. So
it's helpful.
Yeah. So that is basically a wrap on our interview, but I do finish every interview with a simple challenge I call the Hero's Challenge. And we do this to help get access to stories that we might not otherwise find on our own. So the question is simple. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? With the work that you do, I imagine you have a lot. But who are they? First names are fine. And why do you think they should come share their story with us here on The Hero Show? First person that comes to mind for you.
So one of the clients I work with a lot of times, Jay runs some really cool companies. He runs 2 or 3 different companies. Some of his companies are in marketing, some are in CPG, e-commerce products. He's a great guy. Jay, Damien, on the storytelling side, you would have a blast talking with Damien. One of the most creative geniuses really that I know. Alex is an awesome entrepreneur. He's not the frontline guy in terms of face of a like a product business or something like that, but he's the guy that runs the business that makes the other businesses run, if that makes sense. I have a lot of guys I could
Sounds like
tell, but those are a few.
yeah. So we'll reach out after and see if maybe we can get a couple introductions, get someone to come on the show. We don't always get yeses, but when we do, sometimes we get some unique, interesting stories because not everyone is out doing the podcast rounds like you and I might be doing. So to finish off the show, in comic books, there's always the crowd of people at the end who are cheering and clapping for the acts of heroism. So as we close, I want to know where people can find you if they want your help in the future. Where can they light up the bat signal, so to speak, and say, hey, you know what, I think a fractional legal team might be exactly what we need. And more importantly than where is who are the best people to reach out and ask for your help?
Listen, anybody who wants to cheer me on can reach out anytime, anywhere. But the best place to reach me and the people who should reach me, startups and small businesses. I mean, that's the world I live in. I understand your chaos. I actually like it. I like solving it a little bit where I can. Startups and scaling businesses should reach out. They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. I post a fair amount, but I'm available through DMs all the time. And if you get on LinkedIn, you find somebody named Jeff Holman, it'll say something about building fractional legal teams. That's me. I'm the only guy that you're going to find with that. And then the other thing we do, as I mentioned before, for prospective clients, we'll do a strategy call, a free 30-minute strategy call with people. And that's where we just kind of hear about your business. What are the business milestones you're working towards? And what are the legal steps that we can add into your business milestones to help you kind of understand what your roadmap would look like for the next 12 to 18 months. And we kind of do that within the framework of the strategy, definition, and factors that I mentioned before. So I like doing that. I always like meeting cool and interesting people, working on cool and interesting things. So, you can get onto our website, intellectualstrategies.com. You can book a call from there pretty easily. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff, for coming on and sharing your perspective and your story with us here on the show today. If you're listening and anything that Jeff has said or we've talked about has gotten any sort of desire for you to talk to a legal team, as someone who's been there and done this a couple of times, having legal representation, especially someone who knows what you're doing and has been there and can advocate as a business owner, right? As a business owner themselves, I would definitely take the time to reach out to Jeff. And again, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us today. Do you have any final words of wisdom for the audience before I hit this stop record button?
I'm just going to say it's been my pleasure, Richard. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Hero Show, where we work to shift the cultural narrative around entrepreneurship and celebrate the heropreneurs who make our world a better place. Don't forget to visit our website at theheroshow.tv, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in our show, we'd truly appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or better yet, share it with a friend to help us spread the message of entrepreneurship as a force for good. Curious to learn more about the stories and insights of these incredible heropreneurs? Check out our in-depth interviews and resources on our website. Together, let's support and inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs as they embark on their own heroic journeys. Join us again next week for another episode of The Hero Show, where we'll continue to explore the world of heropreneurs, their superpowers, and the positive impact they bring to our lives. Until then, stay heroic.